Today's guest coached Tony Robbins in his first years in the speaking business, but before that, he was picking cotton at 6 years old, dropped out of high school, and at 23 went from 15 cents in his pocket and a sheriff's notice on his door to millionaire in 12 months. What he learned in that year became the power of letting go, the framework that's transformed nearly 2 million people's lives. Jim is here today to talk about why motivation doesn't create change and what actually does. Jim, welcome to the Grateful Podcast.
Hey, well, thank you, Jack. It's great to be here.
Amazing. Jim, you were picking cotton at 6 years old, as I said. You were pumping gas as a teenager. You were a father by my age, and you were working the factory assembly line for 4 years. Then you quit. You went all in on a business. You got loaned $4,000 and spent a year talking to 10 people a day and getting rejected by almost every single one of them. 3,650 no's, not a single sale, but you didn't quit. Honestly, I think I would have quit. I think most people would have. What kept you there?
Well, I did make one sale, Jack. So out of 3,650. So not a good ratio, though. But, I've been asked that question before, and part of me doesn't know how to answer it because I'm not sure. But on the other side of that, I think it was kind of a combination of desperation and inspiration. I wanted something more in my life. Where I was, I didn't have it. Um, I was desperate to make money because I was being thrown out of my home that had been foreclosed. I didn't have both of my vehicles had been repoed, so I didn't have transportation. Half of my furniture had been taken, so it was going to be easy to move, but I had no place to move it. And I think what kept me going was I had no other options. I think that was part of it. Plus, when I first looked at this opportunity, yes, it cost me $4,000 that I didn't have. I went to 23 banks and loan companies before the number 23 loaned it to me, and it was a loan shark at 50% interest. And I didn't know the difference back then. And 50%, 100%, I didn't care. I just wanted it so I could get going and make a lot of money because I'd never made much money before. Picking cotton, if you've ever picked cotton before, you probably haven't. And a lot of youngsters these days probably don't even know where cotton comes from. You know? But picking cotton is hard work. And back then we got paid 2 cents a pound for it. And cotton doesn't weigh much of anything. So you could work all day as a youngster at 6 years old. I could work all day and make maybe $1
Hmm.
because, 6 years old. And my parents, my dad he'd probably make $7 or $8 a day. My mom about $5 a day. So it just depends on how hard you wanted to work.
So you learned pretty quickly that working hard didn't correlate to any success.
But yeah,
You could be the hardest working person in the world, but you weren't going to be the most successful by any means.
working hard is a good thing if you're working hard in the right direction. But I think in today's world, there's so much information coming to us that we may think we're busy and working, but we're really not. We're at least a portion of the time. And so easy to waste a lot of time on social media and places like that aren't really gaining you any traction as far as business is concerned. But I learned from everything that I did. I learned from picking cotton that hard work wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go. And it was brutal. It was hot. It was dusty. It was miserable. Um, but I remember it like it was yesterday. But I also learned a work ethic, and I tried to beat my prior day's uh, income the next day. So every day I try to get a little better, a little better. In the same way at the gas station, I think because I was so good, I kind of thought of myself as the best gas station attendant in the world. And somebody would come in. That's back when they called them service stations. So you came in and get gas. Well, you'd check their tires, you'd sweep out their car, you'd wash their windshield, you give them gas, and whatever else you could do to accommodate that person. And and as a result of that, A fella came in one day, and my dream job was working in the factory down the street, a few miles away. And this fella came in, had been in multiple times, and I gave him excellent service that day. And he stopped me and he said, "Young man," he said, "what are you doing working in this gas station?" I said, "Well, it's my job." And I said, "I'm pretty good at it." And he said, "No, you're not pretty good." He said, "You're really good." And he said, "When I drive by here, if that other guy in there comes out," he said, "I drive off until you're available because I like you waiting on me every time." He said, "But you shouldn't be working here. You should be working in the factory down the street." He says, it's you're out of the weather, you make more money." And I said, "Yeah, well, I don't have a high school diploma." He said, "I tell you what I'll do." He said, "I'm a supervisor there." He said, "I'll get you set up to come in and take a test. And it's more of like a dexterity test of putting a round peg in a round hole and things like that. And he said, if you could pass that, I'll get you on." So I passed it, got the job, and out of 9,000 people, I was clumsy at first. We had these little, it was like a gun, but it was a wire, it was an air gun with a little hole in it, and you put a wire end in and you put it on a terminal and it spun it around the terminal. And so they would give you a certain amount of time to do a certain type of job. And if you finished it in that length of time, let's say an hour, to give you an hour's job, then you ran 100%. At 100%, they couldn't fire you. At 85%, they could fire you. And so I got to 100% pretty fast, but within about a year and a half, I was number one out of 9,000 people. My efficiency was my percentage was 457%. So I was doing a job of 4.57 people,
Wow.
but I didn't make any more money. And part of what I did was I memorized the blueprints. Don't know how I did it, but I did. You know, we're wiring telephone switchboards. And so, but I didn't strive to be the best. I strived to be my best. And
Mm.
when I got introduced to the direct selling company and they told me if I wanted to make a lot of money to talk to 10 people a day. And I didn't know how hard that was going to be. We didn't have the internet or anything. That's been 50 years ago. And so you had to really go out and meet 10 people a day. And I did for a year. I never failed a day that I didn't go talk to 10 people. I didn't care if it was a Saturday or a Sunday or whenever it was. I found 10 people somewhere to talk to. And so 3,650 people later, and I made one sale. And that was it. And you mentioned in the intro there, I was standing in my kitchen, was looking out the window, thinking, what am I going to do? My home was in foreclosure. I had a note on the door from the sheriff saying you got to be out in 5 days. Both of my vehicles been repoed, um, and I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what to do. I thought about going back to the factory, and there were two things that stopped me. One is I didn't have a vehicle, and it was 15 miles away. Secondly, I just couldn't go back. I didn't have it in me to
Mm.
retreat. And I don't know why. I just wanted to make this work. And I saw other people making it work, but it didn't work for me. And so what happened was, and what turned it all around, you mentioned I made $1 million over the next 12 months from 15 cents in my pocket to, well, we didn't have any food in the house. I had 15 cents in my pocket, no way to buy food, no vehicle. So, and I had a wife and a child. And so I picked up a 5-gallon container of carpet shampoo. I was selling cleaning products. And I walked about 3 miles in 100-degree temperature. And probably every 100 feet, I would set it down. Sometimes I would sit down on the bucket. One time I sat on the bucket and just cried because I'm going, I don't even know what to do. This is stupid.
Mm.
He's probably not going to buy it anyway. And it was the one sale that I had made about 6 months prior. And I thought, maybe he'll buy this. And if he does, I'll have about $20 and I'll be able to buy food for the family. And So I kept going and kept going. And when I got there, I was soaking wet from sweat, walked into his office, and this guy was the largest builder in Oklahoma City, where I lived at the time. And um, he built apartments and, a lot of other things, but mostly apartments he was into. They owned about between 3,000 and 4,000 units of apartments. And I worked for him during the summer, a couple of three summers. And sometimes in the evening, I'd clean up around the projects. And I always carried a hammer and a ruler with me. And in the ninth grade, the shop class that I was in, we built a home and we built from ground up. So I knew all of the trades. So I would find mistakes that the carpenters made or the electricians
Mm.
made or the plumbers made. And I was always looking at things and inspecting them. And then I'd tell him, hey, I fixed this door. It was too wide. It's supposed to be this wide, or it was too narrow or whatever. And so he really liked me and thought I was pretty bright. So I walked in that day and he was standing in the lobby and I told him I had this carpet shampoo. I thought he was probably out of it. And he said, yeah, Mary, cut him a check. And so I ended up with $20 or roughly. And then he said, hey, do you have a few minutes? My brother and I'd like to talk to you. And I said, sure. I had no idea what about. And so I go into his office and he said, we really like you. He said, you've been around our business for a couple of years now. And he said, you've actually saved me a lot of money. He said, one time you even saved me quite a bit at one time because you saw some guys loading up a truck full of lumber and they were stealing it. And he said, and you reported back to us and we caught him. And he said, that would have cost me, back then, hundreds of dollars. But he said, you saved me a lot of money. And he said, we'd like to offer you a business deal. And I said, well, if it's investing anything, I don't have money to invest. And he said, no, 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 we want to invest in you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we have this new project. We want to try something new. He said, we're as busy as we could be. He said, we don't have any more time. He said, we have this project. It's a 52 unit apartment complex that we're going to build. We already have the property. We have the plans. We have the permits. And we'd like to make a deal and you build it for us. I said, what do you mean? Me build it for you? He said, we'll give you the plans and you build it from the ground up. And I said, okay. I mean, it really took me back a little bit. I said, so how does that work? And what I really meant was, how do I get paid? And he said, we'll pay you $300 a week. And right then my mind goes, I'm in. Because now I got $300 a week coming in, even if I can't build it, that'll last me for a while. He said, $300 a week. And he said, we'll furnish you a car. We'll buy you a new Impala, Chevy Impala. This won't be yours. It'll be in our name, but it's yours to drive. And he said, if you need it, we'll furnish you with a 3-bedroom furnished apartment. So the only thing I needed when I left home that day was an income, and a place to live, and a car to drive. And I got all three of them there because I spent an hour, a little more than an hour, probably closer to 2 hours walking in the heat, carrying that bucket, hoping to get $20. And I said, well, when do we start? How does this work? What do I do first? And he said, well, we'd like to start right away. This was on a Friday. So we'd like for you to start on Monday. And he said, we'll send you a list of contractors and I'll meet you at the property, or we can go out there today and then we'll come back on Monday as well, show you where everything is. I'll give you the plans. You can take them home, study the plans. If you got questions, we can talk about it Monday morning. And so he said, it takes about 14 months to build this type of project. He said, if you're good at it, you might maybe build it in 12 months, but probably not. And he said, if you're not very good at it, you might build it in 16 months. And then he said, that's really up to you. And he said, but if you build it in 12, you got a $60,000 bonus because it saved him all his construction loans and interest rates and all that kind of stuff. And he said, but that's not likely. And every day you go past 12 months until you hit 14 months, all your bonus is gone. So you lose $1,000 a day until you finish it. He said, and heck, if you finish it before 12 months, which is almost not likely at all, we'll give you another 1,000 a day for every day you finish it before. So I took on the project. I took the plans home and I looked at it and I looked at the list of contractors and I'm going, heck, there's 8 buildings on this project. And they only gave me one contractor or one name for each contract in the on the project. So in other words, one cement finisher, one construction framer, and electrician, and so on. And I thought, well, there's 8 buildings. I think I'm going to hire 8 of each.
Yeah.
So I got 8 cement finishers. I got 8 plumbers to put in all the plumbing in the floor. Then I had the cement finishers. I had 8 of those come in. Long story short, I built it in 8 months.
Wow.
And he told me too, he said, if you build it in less than 12, you got the opportunity to earn 10% ownership in the property. And he said, and we may do some more projects with you. But he said, none of that's likely, but if you do, he said, that's an incentive for you. Well, I built it in 8 months and ended up with 10% ownership in the property and made just under $500,000 with bonuses and everything that came with it. And had some other bonuses that they threw in, like waste and theft and things like that. Anything I could save them, I got half of it. And now when I got back home that day, there was a knock on the door, and it was somebody from the direct sales company, an executive. And he spent 2 hours with me and taught me what I was doing wrong and what I needed to be doing. I worked that business at night and early morning before I went to the construction project. And that business earned me over $500,000 in the next 12 months. So I went from 15 cents to millionaire in 1 year because I wouldn't quit.
It's an incredible story, probably the most transformational story I've ever heard from anyone I've ever talked to. And it absolutely blows my mind. What do you think was behind this? Because, I mean, from an outside perspective, the coincidences there are incredible. Did you have faith before this? Did this make you believe in anything? What was this miracle? Why did it happen? What do you believe was the force driving it?
Well, I hear a lot of people say that, God put me in this position to learn something or, something like that. My philosophy is we put ourselves in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And we make the choice to be where we are. If you connect the dots backwards, you'll see every choice you made that brought you exactly where you are today. And my belief is that God will support you in whatever you decide. If you decide to be down and out, you'll gain support for that. Because what you put out to the universe is what you're going to obtain. If you put out struggle and my life is a struggle, then you're going to be provided things to show you that your life is a struggle.
Hmm.
So if you decide you're going to be a millionaire and you decide that with every fiber of your being, and it's a firm decision that nothing less than that will do, then opportunities show up for you. But before you make the decision, why would the opportunities even show up? Why would you even see them? They're already there, but you don't see them because you haven't decided to have that yet.
So it's about a decision.
It's all the decision is the foundation. I saw something this morning. Somebody posted up on, I believe it was on LinkedIn. Which is most important? No, which comes first? Belief or action? And I just had to comment on it because I said neither. The foundation is the decision that you make. When people say, no, the belief is stronger. Well, if you look up belief in the dictionary, it's defined as to have an opinion. It doesn't sound very strong. To try, I'm going to give it a try. Try is defined as to struggle.
Mm.
Uh, but uh, knowing is to be certain. So when you make a decision that doesn't allow for anything less than that, that becomes a knowing, and that's a foundation that creates, we've all heard about mindset. Well, it creates a mindset that nothing less than this will do. And then your view of the world changes. We don't attract things to us, we create things. We're
Mm.
creative beings. And so it's not the I don't believe that the law of attraction brings things to you. I think the law of creation, based on your decision, shows you opportunities you would never see before. Now, some people say, well, I attracted that. No, you became that and you saw it. It was already there. Decisions come first, then the answers.
When you say that the law of attraction doesn't actually bring you things, do you believe that other famous speakers and philosophers on the law of attraction, such as Bob Proctor, who you are connected with, do you believe that that's what he was saying, just with different words? Because Bob was a big advocate for the law of attraction, and many of your associates are. So, do you believe that you guys are saying the same thing with just separate language, or do they genuinely teach something
Well,
different?
I'd have to talk to them to see, but I know there are some people out there that think that you attract those things to you. You become something and then you attract all that to you. Um, I just don't see it that way. If the law of attraction worked, if I'm driving down the freeway in the middle of nowhere and I'm hungry, um, I shouldn't have to pull off the road and get a hamburger. I should be able to materialize it on my console. That's the law of attraction. Um, but you can't do that. Not at least I can't do that. I don't know, maybe somebody else. Yeah. But it's a fine line. I'm not putting down the law of attraction. I'm just saying that we create our circumstances, and it is a fine line. You say, well, I attracted that. No, you created it because your view of the world changed. I say, well, that is attraction. Uh, uh, you know, but actually you wouldn't have seen that unless you change. So it's kind of a fine line, but I just see it as the law of creation
I
versus
think it
the law of
comes down to who you're crediting for the thing. And I've had a lot of conversations with my father about this because I was raised very atheist on my dad's side of the family. And part of the reason is because I found that a lot of atheists want to have credit for the things in their lives, which makes a lot of sense. And then you talk to the most religious people, and they give all of their credit to God, for example. And I found personally that the best balance is somewhere in between. But when you look and you study different religions and different philosophies, you find that everything kind of has this through line of we are all connected in some way. So whether we believe in the universe or God or a bunch of different gods, a multitude of gods in something such as Hinduism, we believe that everything is connected in a way which makes us, in some sense, very a spiritual being, right? And even if you look at the Big Bang Theory and atheism, we all come from this single point in space. So everything is related in a way. And when you look at it that way, I think you can start to give credit. The things that you take credit for can also be given credit to the universe or to everything around you because we're not working as isolated mechanisms. We're working together in harmony with everything around us. And so when you talk about the law of attraction versus creation, I think that it is the same thing. It just goes down to where's the credit being given.
Yeah, I mean, there's different well, perception. Everybody has a different perception to some degree. You could probably walk into a church, for example. You probably walk into any church, and everybody in there has a different perception about what they gain for being there. Um, and some people may call it the law of attraction. Some people may call it coincidences. Um, some may look at it like, I created the whole thing. But if you go, well, a good story I heard. My friend Jim Rohn used to tell this story. So the guy was walking down the street, And he looks over and he sees this guy in his garden. And he walks over and he said, wow. He said, you and God have a beautiful garden here. And the gardener said, yeah, you should have seen it when God had it by himself. It was full of weeds, you know. It's so it requires decision and action on our part. And the garden is not unlike not unlike life, because the weeds in a garden and the weeds in life. So you make a decision, you plant a seed, and you grow up a plant, and it bears fruit or vegetable or whatever it is you're planting. And by the way, it grows whatever it is you're planting. You don't plant corn and get grapes. It just doesn't work that way. Um, but then once it starts growing, you got to keep the weeds plucked out or they'll smother out your plants. And in life, the weeds are negativity or doubt, uncertainty, lack of clarity, fear, all of those things. Back to a story that uh, of a friend of mine and I, we were talking one day, and he said, hey, Jim, he said, what do you think the word resourceful means? I said, I don't know. I mean, maybe using your imagination or being more productive. I said, why? And he said, oh, it's just an interesting word. And I said, yeah, I guess so. And that was it. So about 2 hours later, I was driving home and I couldn't quit thinking about the word. I mean, it just kept ringing in my head. And this was 35 years ago. And so I didn't have internet or Google or anything to go look it up and see if I could find other definitions or whatever. And I went, when I got home, I went right to the dictionary, Webster, open it up, look up the word resourceful, defined as once again full of source. I thought, that's interesting, depending on what you think source is. And then I looked up the word source. Blew me away. It says where all things originate. Not some things, but all things. I went, wow, that's powerful depending on what you think source is. I had to go the next morning to a bookstore, local bookstore that I'd ordered some books. And so I went in, I said, do you happen to have a book on the origin of words? And she said, yes. I looked through it. I didn't even find the word source. I said, do you have other types of dictionaries other than Webster? Yes, we've got a couple. So I looked in those, same definition. And then I was kind of obsessed off and on with it, trying to find another definition. I don't even know why, but I was always thinking of, not every moment of every day, but it just popped in my head occasionally. And so I was over in the UK presenting an event, and we had about a 2-hour break. And so I went out for a walk, beautiful afternoon. And on my way back, I see this sign on the back door of an old building. It said antique books. And I thought, wow, I love old books. I didn't even think about looking up source or anything there. I just like old books. And so I walk in the back door. The first thing I see is a dictionary about 8 to 10 inches thick. And the edges were all kind of torn and tattered. That looked like the pages were brown in it. So I wished I'd looked at the publication date. I don't know when it came out, but and it had a sign on it that said, do not open. So I stood there in front of that book and looked at it and looked at that do not open site for probably for 3 or 4 minutes. Finally, I thought, oh, I bet that's for the people in the UK. And so I was prepared to buy it, I guess, if I destroyed it in some way or tore the pages. So carefully I opened the book and I went to the S's and looked up the word source. And it was pretty much the same thing I'd seen before, some little explanations of the definitions and things. And then I see one that says source defined as love. I went, wow. Resourceful is once again full of love. I thought, that's amazing. And I left there and I walked along and I thought, how do you apply that to your life and to your business? And it hit me. I thought, well, when you make a firm decision to have something, when you really commit to having it, you fall in love with it. And that's what creates the passion to keep you moving forward until you accomplish it.
Hmm.
And I thought, wow, that's powerful. I thought, I'm going to share that with the group when I get back, what I just discovered. I walk on a little bit further and then it hit me. I thought, wait a minute, there's a flaw in this whole thing. I thought, if all things originate in love, where does fear come from? I thought, oh, that destroys my whole explanation here. Where does fear come from? I walked on another few minutes and then it hit me. I thought, oh, I get it. We fall in love with fear.
Hmm. That's
We
deep.
decide what we want to accomplish in our lives. We fall in love with it. We really want this. And based upon our past programming and our subconscious mind and how we've been programmed to think and feel about ourselves, we make up a fear to keep us from getting that. And that's why so many people try and fail and try and fail and try and fail, because they've got this program inside that doesn't allow them to move forward. They want to, they even take the actions and go to events and buy books and do things to change their life, but they never really apply it because they make up a fear to keep them from it.
They make up a fear.
Well, that's where fear comes from. We make it up. It's not something that's outside us someplace. It's inside us. So we make up
Yeah.
the fear. You go, well, why do you make up the fear? Well, we all do. In one way or another, it's like the fear of falling. You're not really a fear of heights. It's a fear of falling. It's Denver is a mile high, so you don't feel a fear of that when you're a mile high in Denver, Colorado. But um, but we have all kinds of fears. It's like you get out on a ledge on a building, 12-story building. I'd be fearful too about falling. But if that ledge was 12 feet instead of 12 inches, probably wouldn't have that fear. But
Mm-hmm.
we make it up in our minds. We go make a sales call and we get a no. And we make 10 more sales calls and we get a no. By about the 11th call or before that even, we're thinking everybody's giving me a no today. So we make it up in our minds of what's about to happen and it's not even going to happen, but we make it
Mm-hmm.
happen. That's what we focus on. So, my approach is make up something new, make up something more productive instead of making up a fear. But what happens though is during the first 5 years or 6 years of your life, before you started to school, during the first 6 years of my life, and everybody's life, the child wants to be happy. They want to learn things. They want to have fun and they want to be loved and they want to feel safe and secure. And you look at us as adults, we want the same thing. It's ingrained in our DNA. That's what we want. That's who we're supposed to be. But we're not all raised that way in the first 6 years of our life.
No.
Before we have responsibilities, those are the things we want. It'd be learn new things, have fun, be loved, and feel safe and secure. Well, some kids grow up in orphanages and foster homes. They don't even know if they're ever going to have a home. Can't imagine what that would be like for a child. Some kids are abused verbally, physically, emotionally, sexually. Some grow up in households watching one parent abuse the other parent. What does a child do with those experiences? And the answer is that they learn to suppress them. They don't know that's what they're doing, but they're suppressing so they can get back to being happy as fast as they can. The problem is when you suppress a negative like that, you can't quite get back to being as happy as you could. And if that happens over a period of about 6 years, by the end of that 6 years, we've already formed a core belief that we have about ourselves and about life at 6 years old. And we don't know we have it. How could we? And we carry that right into adulthood. And it changes faces as we go. It might show up in your workplace, lack of confidence, lack of self esteem, not speaking up when you should, not not even though you know you're right, you don't say you are, in a conference room or something, because afraid you'll be rejected. The child grows up not getting the love and attention they feel like they deserve. That may be where it shows up. Or it may show up with somebody overeating because they get their joy and pleasure from eating. Nobody loves me anyway. It doesn't matter. I'll just eat or drink or, in worst case, drugs. Um, or it could be a series of short term relationships because they don't feel worthy of being loved. Or, worst case scenario, they end up as a victim in an abusive relationship. And
Hmm.
that happens a lot. I've helped 300 women out of abusive relationships and probably two or three dozen men. And it's so simple from my point of view, but if you're in it, it's not so simple because you can't see your way out. You don't even know how you got into it. How did I end up here? I just had one of these, 3 months ago, and now I got another one. And then you pack
Yeah.
up and leave, you go right to another one because you haven't changed you. And that happens in relationships, it happens in business affairs, and it just changes faces based upon what we believe to be true about life and business and ourselves.
Yeah. So, a lot of these people, they'll end up going somewhere if, or I guess not a lot of them, but some of these people, they'll end up getting the inkling that they want to change something. And they start attending seminars, they start reading books, they start learning about things that will help them get to that point where they can make a change in their lives. Maybe they can start to identify that through line, that paradigm that's controlling where they are right now that they developed at 6 years old, that core belief. But in today's society, what people most likely do is they'll go on social media and they'll follow people that talk about things that might make them feel a little bit better for five
Yes.
seconds after they watch a video. Then they'll scroll to another video and they'll watch another, and it might make them feel better for about 4 seconds this time.
Yes.
And that's what they're doing. People today are getting these little small tidbits of motivation, but
Yes.
there's no real transformation happening. What do you think, as someone that spent their entire life, 44 years, studying how people transform, what do you think is it going to take to help kind of reverse the culture we're building of short term motivation and turn it into a mechanism where people can actually transform their lives?
Well, it's looking inside and versus outside. If you want to learn a new skill, uh, you have to first maybe go outside yourself to learn about that skill, and then you have to practice it. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Um, you want to be write code or whatever. Somebody's got to teach you how to do that unless you figure out how to do it yourself. Um, I don't even know what it means, actually, so I'd have to go way outside myself. So, um, but to change your life, yes, you got to take action toward things that you want to accomplish. But at the same time, if you look at your life as a whole, not just money, not just success, but happiness and relationships and health and all of those things, um, we tend to focus on what we're good at. I
Hmm.
know a guy that's worth about 2.5 to $3 billion. Uh, he looks unhappy. If you get to know him, he's a good person, but on the surface, he's not so good. I get along with him because he doesn't intimidate me. He intimidates everybody else, it seems like. You go out to dinner, everybody expects him to buy. If I go out to dinner with him, I buy.
Hmm.
Make sure that I do. So um, he's about, probably, I would guess, 75 pounds overweight. He breathes heavy, because of excess weight. He looks tired. He doesn't exercise. He eats crap. He just eats anything. He'll go eat Big Macs for lunch and breakfast or whatever. It doesn't matter to him. But he is really good at making money. Oh, he's been married
Yeah.
6 times in 12 years. Six
Okay.
times in 12 years. So
Wow.
everything else in his life is a shamble, but he's making money, so everybody looks up to him like he's a great person. Well, he may be a great person, but there's something deep inside that's causing him not to be able to excel in those other areas. So the power that we have inside us is let go, is released by letting go of things that disempower us. It's discovering what's holding you back. It's not something outside, it's always something inside. Unless, again, it's a skill you need to learn.
Mm.
So, but so many people go learn the skill and then they don't follow through because they don't see themselves worthy of following through and using the skill. People go join the
Oh,
gym,
interesting.
95% drop out within 6 weeks. They don't continue. People go to an event to learn how to make money and start a business. 90% don't start a business. They just continue going to events. I knew a guy one time, he was so proud of this. We had lunch and he said, come over to my house. I want to show you something. So we drove by there. He raises the garage door. It's a double car garage full of personal development, books, albums, CD, cassettes, all kinds of things that he had purchased over the years. He said, how much you got invested in this? He said, I have no idea. He said, hundreds of thousands probably. And I said, have you listened to all of this? And he said, yes. I said, how's it working for you? He said, man, I couldn't even afford to buy you lunch. And he said, I can't keep a marriage together. I've lost 3 homes. And he said, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And so what you're doing wrong is you're not looking inside yourself. That's where the answers are. And sometimes people need somebody to help them look inside. But one tip that I'll give people, we're all aware that we have problems. So awareness doesn't do much. You can certainly be aware that you're unhealthy or you're overweight or you're not making enough money or relationship's not working. You can be aware of those things. But if you observe yourself and ask yourself, once you decide to have something in your life, is this action taking me there or taking me further away? Is it moving me closer, taking me further away? Because we don't live in a gray world. It either is or it isn't. It's like you
Mm.
want to be healthy, you stop at fast food for a burger or something. The question is that making you healthy or taking you further away? Well, it's only one a month. Doesn't matter. I'm not judging it. I'm saying eat 2 a month if you want, but is it helping you get healthier or not? It's one or the other.
Yeah.
So if we become observant of ourselves and see the part we play in a relationship, not just about a relationship with the opposite sex or your significant other, um, but your relationship to money, your relationship to success. If you actually observe yourself and the actions you're taking, you'll start to let go of stuff on a level that you never believed possible. If you want to be happy, we've learned to be unhappy. We've learned to be unhappy people. Children are always happy until they start getting programmed. So happiness comes from unlearning, not from learning.
And unlearning comes from observation and taking action toward the thing that you've committed to taking action toward.
And letting go of the opposite. If you're used to eating a burger every day for lunch, and you finally decide, no, I'm going to get healthy. So you is this taking me toward it or away from it? You're going, well, I really would love to have that burger. Are you willing to let go of that to have this? You have to ask
Mm.
yourself, or if you've been hurt in the past, you lost money, you got hurt in a relationship. The question is, uh, do you think hanging on to that feeling of loss is helping you to live a better life today? And for most people, the answer is no. And in fact, I had a group last night that I was speaking with, and the answer was no, unanimously. It's not helping me. Then my next question is, do you like feeling that way? And the answer is no. And the next question is, I said, hanging on to that, do you think it's helping you get where you want to go? And the answer was no. And I said, do you want to let it go? And the answer is always yes. And then my next question was a little harder. I said, are you willing to? And people are so attached to their resentment and their judgment and their whatever that they're hanging on to, even about themselves. They're so attached to that that they believe that's who they are. And
Hmm.
and and when I say, are you willing to let that go? It really sets people back. Now, some people say yes, but when you really think about it, are you really willing to let that go so you can move forward with your life in that area? And some people will go, well, Ken, maybe I'll get back with you tomorrow. I want to think about that for a while. And you know that they're just not going to.
They're not gonna do
And
it. Yeah.
no. And then I said, okay, are you willing to let it go? And if the answer is yes, then the last question is when?
Mm.
When? Well, maybe I'll start January 1st. No, this is December. Let's do it now, you know,
Yeah.
instead of waiting and setting a New Year's resolution or something. But you know, that's the way people are. We get attached to what we believe to be true, even though all beliefs are false. Until we decide it's true, then it's only true for us, and we'll fight to the death to prove to ourselves in the outside world that what we believe is true.
Yeah. People fight for any belief, even beliefs that keep them stuck, especially beliefs that keep them stuck. People will
Yeah.
fight to tell you why it's so hard to succeed in their business, why it's so hard to make money, why it's so hard to take the risk they've always wanted to take. I think it's one of the hardest things about being a human being that we have these beliefs that we can become so easily attached to. And part of me wonders, looking into your story and many of the most successful people, if there is in some aspect some utility to having less to begin with, because there's less that you're attached to. When you said it yourself, when you were all in on your direct sales company, even though you had only made one sale in an entire year, you kept going because you didn't know what else you would do. As Napoleon Hill would say, you'd burn the boats, right? But for so many people, they will never burn the boats. They have so much in their lives going already, where the hardest part about leveling up, so to speak, is that you have to let go of the life that you're currently living. And I think a lot of people like their life. They don't love it because what they love is up here, but they like their life enough that it becomes hard to change without some catalyst that's like, all right, this now has become so painful, I need to move.
And it's not even as much as they like it as they are comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Because comfort, when we look at something that's going to be hard, it's going to cause pain in our lives, pain or struggle, or we have to push to, do something we haven't done before. We weigh out those two pains, the pain of changing, the pain of staying where we are. And we always endure one of those two. So
Mhm.
if we decide not to move forward and make a change in that area, then we endure the pain of staying where we are. If we decide not to stay where we are, then we can have the other thing. I'll give you a good example. One of my sons, Warren, when he was 10, we lived in a small community in Ashland, Oregon, small little town. And he came in one morning, and my office was over in the corner of the house in a separate room. And he walks in and he said, Dad, he said, would you buy me this? It's called a Game Gear back then. It was a little handheld game. It was a Game Boy and then a Game Gear, and there was a
Okay.
little handheld stuff. And he would beat every little game he had. He beat it. He would beat it. I mean, he would be on it until it was done. No, I don't care if he was playing something on a video or a machine or whatever. But anyway, he comes in. He said, "Would you buy me this Game Gear?" And I said, "Well, how much is it?" He said, $118. And I said, "I tell you what I'll do. I'll pay half." And he looks at me and he said, "Well, I don't have $59." I said, "Well, figure it out." He's 10 years old. And he goes, "Figure it out." And he kind of looked disappointed and turned and walked out of my office. It was maybe 2 hours, 3 hours later. He comes in with a brown paper bag. He had a red heart drawn on it and colored it in. And he's holding that bag, and he said, Dad, he said, have you ever had Mrs. Fields cookies? I said, yes. I said, I have. I said, we've had them together. And he said, yeah, I know. He said, they're pretty good, aren't they? And I said, they're really good. I said, I've actually been to their first location they opened in Park City, Utah. And I said, yeah, it's really good. He said, aren't they about this big? And I said, yeah. He said, aren't they about 75 cents? And I said, yeah, I think so. He said, well, I mom had a Mrs. Fields cookie recipe book. And he said, I looked through the recipes and I found one that I could greatly improve upon. So I'm going to bake cookies and sell them. And he said, but mine are going to be this big, not this big. And he said, instead of Mrs. Fields, mine's going to be called Mr. Britt's cookies. And under the heart, he had written Mr. Britt's cookies and showed me the bag. And he said, so I'm charging $1 instead of 75 cents. And if they buy a dozen, it's $10. I said, well, how are you going to sell those? He said, I'm going to go around the neighborhood and sell them. And I said, so you're going to bake cookies and go sell them? He said, no, I've already talked to Mom, and Mom's fronted me the money alone to buy the ingredients to bake the cookies, and I'll pay her back out of proceeds. And I said, okay, well, that's good thinking. And I said, but how are you going to sell them? You're going to go bake cookies and take them and sell them? No, no, no. He said, I'm going to go around and take orders, bake the cookies and take them back. I said, well, then you're going to be chasing money, because if they're not at home, then you got to go back again and again and again. He said, no, no, no. When I sell the cookies, I'm going to collect the money. Then I'll deliver them later. I said, so I'm thinking in my mind, there's nobody that's going to give this kid $10 for a dozen of cookies that they don't even have the cookie. He's going to go bake them and bring them back. Well, it was about maybe 2 hours after that, I smelled cookies baking. And I go in the kitchen, and he's pulling out 2 big trays of cookies. And I said, so you decided to bake them first? He said, no, I already sold these. I sold my first 2 dozens, and I'm baking them right now. And I said, looks like you got more than 2 dozen. He said, I baked a few extra. And I said, can I have one to try it? And he said, yeah, for $1. So long story short, he made almost $400 in the first week selling those cookies. And
Wow.
then he said, I got this idea, Dad. He said, what's the next holiday coming up? I said, Halloween. He said, I'm gonna bake Halloween cookies. He said, what's the next holiday after that? I said, Thanksgiving. He said, I'm gonna bake Thanksgiving cookies in the shape of turkeys. And he said, what's after that? Is it Christmas? He said, I'll do multiple ones, the Christmas trees or Santa Clauses and things. And I said, then what's after that? And I said, New Year's Eve parties. And he said, yeah, I'll bake for New Year's Eve parties. And I said, what's after that? And he just kept going, Super Bowl and things like that. And this kid started making just hands over fist money like crazy. I mean, it was unreal. He was making $400 or $500 a week at 10 years old selling cookies.
That's
He
incredible.
found out he could take his younger brother with him and just not do anything but stand at the door, and he got a higher sales ratio because of his younger brother was with him. I said,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I said, are you paying Weston any money? He said, no. And I said, well, if you get a higher sales ratio, he's worth something. Okay, I'll cut him in for 10% as long as he's with me. That's a good deal. so Weston's now happy. He's making 10%. And one day we're getting ready to leave town, and we're in the car, or getting ready to get in the car. And he said, Dad, he said, I've got one cookie I need to deliver, and it's about a mile away. Can you drive me down there in the car? And I said, okay, sure. So we get in the car, we drive down there, and it's a good mile away. And so he delivers the cookies, and he comes back, and I said, Warren, I said, why did you come so far down here to sell cookies? I said, what about all these other houses we just passed? He said, I called on all of those. I said, well, out of curiosity, what did you feel like when somebody told you no? He said, kind of looked at me funny. He said, I thought they didn't want a cookie, and I went to the next door. So I was wondering if he experienced rejection, but no, I just thought they didn't want a cookie, so I went to the next door. And we're driving back home. He said, Dad, I don't know what the big deal is about money. He said, my friends say that it's hard to make. My friends' parents are always talking about lack of money and stuff. And he says, it seems to me if you find something that somebody wants or needs or likes and sell it to them, you'll make a ton of money. I thought, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty simple from a 10-year-old, but
What's he doing now?
no programming. He's got his own business, and all of my sons have their own business. And he went. He first off, he managed 3 cell phone at 19 years old. He was managing 3 cell phone stores, 3 of them. He moved to Southern California to manage them, and and then he called me one day and he said, Dad, can you introduce me to somebody where I could go to work in sales on straight commission? And I said, yeah, let me think about it a little bit. And I thought of a guy that I knew that sold timeshares, and I know that's a tough sale. And I said, the only one I could think of down there where you are is this guy that sells timeshares. And he said, can you set me up for an interview? So I called the guy and I said, look, I said, my son wants to work in sales. And I said, he's pretty darn good, but he's only 19. And he said, well, most of my salespeople that are selling these things have been around for 20, 30 years selling timeshares. And I said, well, look, interview him. If you don't think he's cut out for it, don't hire him just because he's my son. Okay. So Warren comes in for an interview, and he calls me later and he said that was a really short interview, and I thought maybe he got turned down. He said I walked in and he shook hands, introduced himself, I introduced myself. He said, so you're Jim Britt's son? He said, yeah. He said, you're hired. He said, we'll train you. And so he gets this manual of the training, and they put him through some training, and he said, I don't know if he said, they tell me to follow this to the letter. And he told me all of what it was. He said, would you change it? I said, yeah, I would. And he said, well, tell me what you would do. And I gave him a few pointers about asking questions and listening and becoming, connecting with the people and that type of thing. And he was number one. His first month, he made over $25,000 selling timeshares.
Incredible.
And he was number one out of the whole group. And all these old guys that have been around forever came to him and said, what are you doing, man? How are you closing all these deals? Because he was closing almost everybody he talked to. He was so good at it. And so he did that for a few months, and then their leads dried up. And so he quit doing that and he started his own business. But it's, um, if we're not buried in stuff that we've accumulated over the years that keep us away from it, we can accomplish the most remarkable things in all areas of our life. I don't think there's a way to live a balanced life. I think we have priorities of what we should do in life. The priority should be taking care of your health. If you got a family, a priority should be taking care of your family. If you're married, it should be, having a good relationship, but at the same time, being able to work and have your profession. But I don't think there's ever a balance, not a true balance, but we have priorities.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, time management isn't a thing. It's priority management because we all have this finite amount of time. And something I've been thinking about a lot is how everybody in the economy right now is just seeking for people's time. Everybody wants to become the person who people go to with their time. I mean, I'm the same thing. I'm a podcaster, speaker. I want people to spend their time with me. And there's more people than ever that want that. But the amount of time in the day is still the same. So the value that you're providing becomes even more important. What's your advice for people in this world that are trying to be the person who people spend their time with. Maybe they're listening to me on their commute to work. What's your advice to people so that others feel compelled to spend their time with them, to give their time to them?
Well, it's kind of two sides to that. One side is on the side where you're spending your time and spinning your wheels, sometimes spending your time, is if people would stop trying to control things over which they have no control, is the best time management that you could ever have. Because if you really look at most people's lives, they're trying to control things over which they have no control, whether it's the weather or the people or the circumstances or the government or the economy or something. Just drop all of that stuff and create your own economy. And let's get going. You know, it's, it, my wife's always saying, doesn't that bother you? I'm going, no, I can't do anything about it. Doesn't bother
Yeah,
me at all. I mean, yeah, if there's something going on, yeah, it kind of bothers me if it's hurting people and stuff, then that kind of bothers you. But if you can't do anything about it, if you're worrying about it or angry about it, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. So let go of that. But I think on the other side of it, you know, if you build something and you build it with integrity, integrity is a foundation for everything. Um, and integrity builds trust. You know, my wife and I, we've been married 42 years. And when I first met her, I didn't walk up to her and said, hey, babe, want to get married? Uh, I might have felt that way, but I didn't say that. I'd been single for 5 years and I didn't even have a thought about getting married or even a relationship. And I wasn't looking for either one until I saw her. Then I wanted to. But integrity builds trust. If a person feels you have integrity, they start to trust you.
yeah,
And trust builds openness. And openness builds bonds. And bonds build relationships.
beautiful.
So if you've got integrity, just think about, you know, you know, people with relationships, or if you have a relationship, or but just think about what integrity does, even in business, for sure in business. Um, if you have integrity, people trust you and they want to do business with you. If they
Yeah,
trust you, they're going to be open to you. And if they're open to you, you're going to build a bond with that person. And if you build a bond, you're going to have a relationship. And that relationship can be lasting as long as you keep those five things intact.
yeah, 100%. Jim, this has been a wonderful conversation. You're an amazing storyteller. I love how you can really paint a picture of a lesson into a story that will stick with me and keep the lesson with it. I have one more question before we end, and I think that this is the most important one of the day. You and a lot of your colleagues and the lineage that you stem from and are a part of, I've found that it's been somewhat diluted from by the modern day motivational self improvement industry. And I want to know from your perspective, what is most important that you'd like to leave behind with the younger generation that they're not getting from other self development, personal development content nowadays? What do you think is the most important thing that a young person that has ambitions, has dreams, wants to live a successful, fruitful, happy, fulfilled life could hear right now?
Well, don't listen to other people's opinions. That's for one thing, for sure, about what you can and can accomplish. If I'd have listened to the people around me when I was growing up, I mean, my parents were not negative. My siblings were like, "What are you doing now?" kind of, you know. But other people, I think I was voted the least likely to succeed when I was in school, and
Least? That's a
I
thing?
dropped out halfway through the 10th grade. But
Oh my god.
but no, I mean, really, I'm pretty sure of that. I mean, I was, you know, I was considered a loser, you know, in school because I hated school. I just didn't like it. There's classes I never went to because I just didn't like the class. I'd skip school and go play pool and things like that. And I was a good pool player, made a little money doing it. Um, but so many times we get programmed out of what we really want to do because somebody else wants us to do it. But be yourself, look at yourself, believe in yourself, get to know yourself, and decide what it is you want to do with your life. And that can change as you go along. It doesn't mean that if you decide you're going to do this one thing, then that's you forever. I've got a client right now that I'm coaching. He's an MD and very successful. He just did one post on Instagram that got 45 million views, so he's doing pretty well there. And but he wants to stop doing what he's doing after 30 years of being an MD, very successful, booked fully, um, to helping people change their nutritional habits.
Right.
And yeah, his credentials as an MD, but he's going to do it in a whole different way. He's going online with it. He's going to create a video uh, course and all of this stuff, and that's what he wants to do full time with his life. He's just finished up the book, so it doesn't mean you got to stick with whatever you're doing forever. I mean, I've launched 28 businesses in my career. 26 of them worked to varying degrees. Two of them didn't. Um, but I'm in the business of doing what I love doing, which is helping people, both in business as well as personally. And the things that I do, sometimes I change how I do it, sometimes I change what I do, and certainly what I believed in, what I believe to be true in the beginning is not the same as I believe today. Because uh, you mentioned motivation. I think motivation is kind of like taking a warm bath. You know, it's good for 30 minutes or an hour, and then it's gone. And
Yeah.
people come to events and get motivated. So I'd say, become a decision maker, decide what you want in your life, what you truly want, and then take action toward that, and observe yourself and make sure you're moving in that direction all the time. And just like a fellow I met the other day, he said he had attended one of my events about 30 years ago. He was from Australia. We were online with a group. He said, "Are you the Jim Britt?" I'm going, "I have no idea." I said, "There's a whole bunch of us out there." And he said, "Could I read you one of your quotes and see if it's you?" He said, "I think it is you, but it's been 30 years." And he said, it's a two-part quote. And he said, "It's on my wall in front of my desk. It's in my bathroom." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Once you decide what you want to accomplish," he said, every action you take is going to move you toward it or away from it. He said, then you went on to the second part of that. And if you don't decide what you want in your life, it doesn't matter what actions you take. And he said, that blew me away. He said, and I live my life by that, by the first part of it. But
Yeah.
the second part is on my wall too, because I catch myself doing stuff I really don't want to do. I haven't
Hmm.
decided to do. And he said, it's molded my life for 30 years, and it still does today. I said, yep, that's my quotes. He said, well, it's great to see you again after 30 years. But, it's life is simple and we try to complicate it too much, I think. And I think I was fortunate that I didn't finish high school because I try to communicate things on a ninth grade level. Um, so everybody can understand it. I don't use 10th grade words or 11th grade words, whatever they
Yeah.
whatever they taught in those grades. I don't know. So anyway,
Amazing.
and enjoy life, man. I mean, the serious thing is you're not going to get out alive, so you might as well enjoy it while you're here, right? We're
Yeah.
going through life. We're all serious about everything. Let's be happy. Let's enjoy life and do things we love doing. And yeah, we have hardships. We have things that come up. We have things we have to deal with, but deal with them and move on. Don't hang on to them. Let go and live for the day because that's where the action is.
So decide what you want after getting really clear by spending time with yourself alone, and take action that brings you toward that thing, and do it while having a good time and love your
Yep.
life.
Yep.
Amazing. All right. This has been the Grateful Podcast, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.